Are you curious about the unknown, the unexplainable? Do you find yourself intrigued by the mysterious and paranormal side of our world? Join us on an adventure into the world of inexplicable discoveries and investigations that may someday give us a final answer as to what may be behind the veil of reality. Then it's time to turn your pods up, because we're live to tape from the mountains of West Virginia. It's time once again for Let's Find Out with co-host Diego. The universe is waiting for you.
Everything in this universe has a beginning. The Big Bang. The formation of nebular matter into stars and planets. The first collections of amino acids in the Earth's oceans. The first creatures to leave them. The first mammals. The first primates that walked upright. The first religion. The first printing press.
Pump up your space boots and phone home. It's time for Let's Find Out with co-host Diego.
Unknown.
Live to tape from the mountains of West Virginia. It's Let's Find Out with co-host Diego. Bigfoot, UFOs, Stargates, Let's Find Out, paranormal, intelligent design, entertainment. Let's find out. You're listening to Let's Find Out with co-host Diego.
Live to tape from the mountains of West Virginia. Welcome to another episode of Let's Find Out with co-host Diego. Thank you for taking this journey with me. On this episode of Let's Find Out, we welcome back a good friend of the show, an author that not long ago published his very popular book, Bigfoot and Other Tales of the Supernatural, and also best known for the Robot Repair Girl stories featured in Brave New Girls Anthology series, now brings you his new book, The Adventures of Madison Brown, the Robot Repair Girl. Madison fights to ensure the freedom of the oppressed, appearing for the very first time in her own collection. We're happy to have back on our good friend Josh Pritchett. My friend Josh, it's been a while. Thank you for coming back on the show, my friend.
Good to talk to you, buddy. How you been doing? How's West Virginia treating you?
Pretty well, man. It's nice and quiet. I hear the moves of the cows and the farms, and some of my neighbors have alpacas still down the road, so it's a beautiful thing for me.
Yeah, well, it sounds nice. We used to have some alpacas around here, but then the guy sold the farm, and they went away. So that's unfortunate. I kind of miss those guys.
You don't get to see that very often in areas where I go to work, but I can talk about these things all day long, especially with the baby goats and all that. It's tremendous, it's amazing stuff. But it's been a while since you and I seen each other. We first met back in, I believe, the spring of 2022 or summer at the Virginia Bigfoot Convention in Stewart's Draft, Virginia. And you were one of the very first guests that when I went to the convention that I had on. You're also one of the very first guests on this new show, Let's Find Out. And I'm happy to have you back. At that time, your book, Bigfoot and Other Tales of the Supernatural, was hot off the presses. You made your rounds to the conventions, and you're doing the very same thing now with your latest book, and that book being The Adventures of Madison Brown from the Robot Repair Girl series. But before we get into that, for those who didn't listen to the show you were on back in March, I believe, of this year, what's the origin of the story of Madison Brown?
Well, thank you. Basically, back in, it's been about 2015 that this started. I met and became friends with author and editor Mary Fan. And at that time, she and Paige Daniels were putting together an anthology called Brave New Girls. The premise of it was it would be stories about teenage girls who were using science and engineering to solve problems. And the proceeds from the sales would go to help STEM programs, which is science, technology, engineering, and math. This is an outreach for young people, especially young women, to get them involved in the sciences. So I was kind of enthusiastic about this, and I had some ideas for a little while about a character that would go out and try to liberate robots. So I thought of Madison Brown. I thought of her, and I wrote the first story, which I just called the Robot Repair Girl at the time. I didn't know we were going to evolve into several stories, but we wrote that, and Brave New Girls did so well that Mary, who had become one of my best friends at that point, called me up and said, "Hey, we're going to do another one. I think we could use another Madison story." And I said, "Okay." So then I wrote another one called The Babysitting Job, which was about where Madison journeys to France to aid a robot there who's basically created by two other robots. And this is about proving that robots are life forms. That, I know there's a big debate about this now because of artificial intelligence, and a lot of people are very worried about it, and rightly so.
Mm-hmm.
But in my fictional context, this is more about, metaphors for people who are being exploited. And then we kind of evolved and we wrote 3 more stories with Brave New Girls, and then we felt as though Madison aged out, and then I developed another character. Earlier this year, Mary told me that all of my original stories, all the rights had reverted back to me, and I was welcome to publish them on my own. So I thought, well, this is an exciting idea. So I decided to add 2 more stories, one of which is called Tackle Dummies, which actually takes place in a futuristic version of Virginia Tech, by the way. And another one called Saving Io. Now, Saving Io is where Madison encounters Bigfoot. And just to kind of give everybody, now you are familiar with the the Pittsburgh incident, are you? If not, I will quickly explain.
Go ahead.
Okay, so what I mean by the Pennsylvania incident is several people reported, I don't remember the date, but a chance sighting of UFOs. And during the same time period, there were several upticks in Bigfoot sightings in the western Pennsylvania region. So I was a little bit inspired by that, but I was also inspired by something that my stepfather was talking to me about after my first Bigfoot book came out, and he knows how obsessed I am. Obsessed is maybe not the right word, but I do love to hear Bigfoot stories, and
Me too. Yeah.
I'm always fascinated. I don't think of Bigfoot as a violent thing generally. I just think of it as a heretofore, as I've told you and I've told many people, Bigfoot is a heretofore undiscovered, uncatalogued primate that people are still debating whether or not he exists or not. And I do fall into the category of I believe it exists. But I don't mind if other people don't believe. That's okay. We only have really the Patterson Gimli footage and a few other things, but I believe people who've talked to me have been pretty sincere in their encounters. So I really wanted to write something where Madison encountered Bigfoot, and I thought it would be fun to sort of kind of merge these things together. And I thought we would read a little bit of it, sort of give everybody kind of a taste. Those who have never heard of Madison or Robot Repair Girl or the Brave New Girl stories, I'm really proud of these. I think it's amongst some of the best writing I've ever done. I mean, when I was going back recently, a few months ago, and editing these stories and putting them together, I thought, man, I forgot how good this was the first time I wrote it. I mean, I actually had done a pretty good job, and I'm truly thankful to my mom for helping me edit the stuff. She's a former English teacher. And of course, very thankful to all my friends, and particularly Mary, for encouraging these stories over the years. But any rate, right now, that's more or less the genesis of that particular story and the other stories. If I'd had more time, I had some other ideas, but I think I'm just going to save them for another book because I don't think I'm finished with Madison, even though she is now a young adult. I think that I will be going back later and writing longer novels about Madison and the other characters in her particular part of the universe.
And now with the new book, and I know you're going to read a little bit from the book here soon, but before we get into that, kind of like this show, if you were to bake, I'm gonna say a cake, you take all the ingredients, right?
Hmm.
And you and I, we're very big sci-fi fans, and
Hmm.
you take one part Star Trek, one part Farscape, one part this. How much of that you have with these series went into the Robot Repair Girl series and Madison?
Well, um, I would say in one of the stories I wrote called False Messiahs is kind of a Doctor Who esque kind of story about these alien AIs that come down. They're kind of like the Daleks, but I describe them as looking like small pyramids, about 6 foot tall pyramids that float around like the Daleks do on Doctor Who. So they're a little bit inspired by that. In this particular story, Saving Isle, that I'm going to read from, I don't want to give too much away, but it does tie into a kind of Star Trek like universe that I am developing or have been developing for a while. I've just felt like I've gone back and forth on some of the ideas, and it does tie in with the new character a little bit. I don't want to give anything away, but I will talk a little bit about. Well, let me talk about this. I have this other character that's now in the Brave New Girls series, and we've written 2 stories about her called Itzel. Itzel is what we call a Leak. A Leak are a humanoid species that evolved from wolves. And at one point, the Leak were kind of enemies of this um, intergalactic coalition called well, it is called the Coalition of Worlds. Um, and various things happened that caused the Leak Empire to collapse, and she and her mother became citizens of the Coalition. And so she is in the first couple stories going off to the I call it the proving grounds, but we'll just call it the Space Academy to learn how to become a member of this group called the Space Guard, which is like Starfleet. And just on a side note, is that Madison in my version of Bigfoot kind of exists in this universe. So my next Itzel story is gonna tie that together. But for right now, what's going on with Madison is it is kind of more of an adventure story, of a teenage girl, and over the years she kind of evolved. That she started out being this kind of skinny, nerdy little girl who worked in her dad's shop and learned how to fix robots, and then she begins learning how to do martial arts. And because to make things interesting, I felt like I had to add some fight scenes. So that was a lot of fun, and I was glad when Paige and Mary didn't have a problem with that. But I draw the line. I don't. Madison does not use guns. This is for kids, so
Mm-hmm.
we keep the violence to a minimum. Um, and we try to not have a lot of guns in these sorts of things. But Madison uses a lot of like kickboxing and kung fu moves that I go into detail about describing for her. That I do a lot of research, and by research I mean going back and watching old Bruce Lee and uh, uh, oh Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan movies. Sorry, I don't know why I blanked on that. Just you'd think I'd remember that, but also Michelle Yao, she's amazing too. Anybody here, I highly do recommend Everything Everywhere All at Once. That was an amazing movie. If you like science fiction, and I highly recommend it. But if you're ready, I'd be happy to read a few pages. If
Of course, we're ready for it.
Okay, all right, here we go. Now this is from the short story Saving Io, which is featured in my book, The Adventures of Madison Brown, the Robot Repair Girl Chronicles. So, okay, so where we're at in the story is Madison has found herself sort of stranded in a small Arkansas town where all of the town's robots, the internet, the cell phones, none of it is working. So she has gone in the woods hoping to find the source of why all the technology has shut down. And we're going to begin here on page 228. Her palms were sweaty, and Madison's heart had quickened. Standing behind one tree, she tried to look between the trees to catch a glimpse of anyone who could be watching her. Madison saw nothing. No one stood between the trees, and nothing moved. A heavy silence seemed to cover the woods around Madison like a shroud. Only her tracker beeped. No birds chirped, nor bugs buzzed, or frogs burped. It was as if the forest was about to sneeze and everything had tensed up in anticipation of the event that was to come. But what was coming, Madison thought. That was when the wood knocking began. It was a loud, hollow sound that seemed to rumble like distant thunder through the woods. The sound nearly made Madison cringe with fear when she heard it. A moment later, Madison thought she could hear it coming from another direction. A loud, hollow tap, tap, tap that reverberated with the rapid speed of a tornado reverberated through the forest. All around her, Madison heard it. Tap, 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 tap. What was that, Madison thought? A signal, maybe? Two people communicating back and forth by hitting the trees really hard with a bat or a club to do what? Then it stopped. It was like someone had pulled the needle off of a vinyl record playing on a turntable. An abrupt stop to the drumming sound. Now what, Madison thought. Something came running quickly through the woods towards her. Madison felt her eyes go wide as she tried to anticipate what was coming at her. A large male deer with a beautiful jagged rack of antlers bounded out of the woods from between the trees. It stopped 50 feet from Madison and looked at her. Madison let out a breath and looked at the deer as it blinked twice at her before turning and running off again into the woods. As if on command, the birds began to tweet again. The forest seemed to pick up right where it had left off. Madison sighed and relaxed a little. Then she took a sip of her water and started following her scanner again. She laughed. Scared by Bambi, Madison chuckled. Madison began to follow her tracker's directions. A short time later, Madison found herself looking out onto a grassy field with her tracker beeping so loudly it nearly drowned out the sound of cicadas that was buzzing all around her. Strangely, there was no structure or machine out there that could block the internet. She looked at her detector in frustration as the cicadas' buzzing seemed to grow louder. It seemed to be working correctly, so what was wrong? All she saw was a wide field, sunshine, and some strange-looking dark plants in the grass. Should be something here, Madison thought in frustration. The frantic cicadas were increasingly ominous as Madison studied the vacant field. The heat was not helping either, as Madison stood there trying to figure out what was wrong with her detector. The field around her seemed to be warmer than the rest of the forest had been. As the sweat rolled down her face, Madison chalked it up to the field being open to more sunshine. The heat she could deal with because of her training in the Australian outback. But those cicadas, ugh, Madison thought. Madison was thinking that their noise would drive her insane if they did not stop. She wiped her forehead and tried to concentrate on her detector, but it was not easy. The heat was starting to make it hard to breathe, and the noise was making her head hurt. She stopped what she was doing and pressed her hands to her temples. Madison felt like the buzzing was going to make her head explode until she heard something make a loud zap pop noise above her. Managing to look up in time, Madison saw the burnt remains of a small bird falling towards the earth in front of her. Madison looked around at the ground and her mouth dropped in horror. She was so determined to find the machine that she had not noticed that the strange dark plants were not plants, but were dead, charred birds that had flown into something. Madison stepped back towards the trees. As she did, Madison looked at the grass again. There were flat sections of the grass around the field. Something heavy was sitting on it, pressing down the grass. The pain in her head lessened as Madison got back to the trees. Taking a deep breath, she looked around and found a small rock. Madison picked it up and threw it over her hand as hard as she could towards the field. There was a sudden flash and another zap sound as the rock struck something invisible. That's impossible, she thought. For something to be invisible, its matter would have to have a negative index of refraction, which was impossible according to everything that she knew about physics. Madison squinted and watched the air in the field shimmer like it did on hot days, and no one could see the heat rise from and one could see the heat rise from a stretch of asphalt. Something is bending the light, she said out loud, wondering if such a field could interfere with the internet. And she felt another pang of fear. Could the pyramid AIs be back? Almost a year ago, Madison, with the help of her friend Cybersoul, fought an alien AI built in the shape of a small pyramid. They had barely prevailed in that battle. As Madison looked out onto the field, she feared that they were back. But what about Servius? How was he mixed up in this? The pyramid had used human slaves while it was occupying a small Kentucky town, but for some reason that did not sound right to Madison. Service seemed strange, but not in a possessed by aliens manner. He seemed more like someone who had come from a distant country and was trying to make sense of the local customs. Either way, Madison needed allies, and that meant that she needed to find a way to contact the AIA. It was time to head back to Helena and come up with a plan. As she made her way back, Madison heard the sound of running water and decided to take a detour. Even though she needed to get back, Madison needed a break and time to form a plan. Maybe sitting by a river would help with both of those needs, she reasoned. After a couple of minutes, she came upon a clear stream that ran along a rocky beach, 100 yards or so. Madison could see the top of some of the falls that carried the river further downwards. Sitting down on the rocks, she took off her socks and shoes and dipped her feet into the cooling water. Then she cupped her hands and scooped up some of the water. It was sweet and cold, and it ran down her throat. Taking her bottle, Madison refilled it from the river. She took another drink before using the water to clean her face. Madison looked at the world around her and realized that the sky was blue with big, puffy white clouds. Some birds twittered and sang further down the river. It was beautiful there, and Madison wished that she could have brought a friend along, like Abby or Kelsey, or even one of her AI friends, like Al or Frank. Madison looked around for another moment and then decided it was time to get back to Helena. She was starting to get up when she smelled something musky nearby, and she realized the birds had stopped singing. Everything was quiet all of a sudden, and Madison suddenly felt like she was not alone. A sudden gust of cold air on her back told her that something was displacing the air around her. Slowly, Madison turned around to look and faced a tall creature covered in dark brown hair with arms that dangled down to its knees. The creature was smiling at Madison.
What a terrific job capturing the environment, the sights, the sounds, and the thoughts of Madison.
Thank you. I
Yeah,
try.
no, terrific job. I'm very sure that this has captured the interest of the listeners. So, with Madison, it's based on anybody you know, or is this completely from your
Uh,
imagination?
Mostly from my imagination. Obviously, I think she's kind of a more, um, idealized version of some of my nieces and other people, and friends of mine. And I wanted to create a hero for young women to really look up to, and I think with Madison and Itzel, I think I largely succeeded. Um,
Yeah, and it's very important because this is just in my opinion, and this is not the kind of show where to go down this route, but I think that there is a lack of positive role models for young ladies nowadays. Where I think when we were growing up, even in sci-fi, we had some pretty solid female leads or co-leads to where they were actually real good ass kickers or just very strong females. But I don't know nowadays. Is there anything out there right now that would be, I guess, compared to a Ripley?
well, I think Michelle Yeoh's character of of from Star Trek that she plays, Georgia, is a pretty good role model. Although it's pretty complicated because, as with her film Everything Everywhere All at Once, she's a person from a parallel universe. She starts out in in the Prime universe, dies, and then comes back as her evil counterpart who finds redemption in the Prime universe. And for those of you who are not familiar with Star Trek, Prime Universe is what we mean by the universe that was largely constructed from the time period of Captain Archer and Captain Kirk and everything going forward. And then you have the Kelvin timeline, which is the J.J. Abrams movies, which some of those are pretty good. Um, yeah, I think you've got her. I think you've also got, speaking about classics, Carol Oates Gooding, who plays young Ensign Uhura on Star Trek Strange New Worlds, is quite an excellent character. And also Christina Chung, who plays Luan Noonien Singh, who's the security chief for the Enterprise on Strange New Worlds. She's quite a butt kicker herself. And for people who don't know what Strange New Worlds is, it's a prequel show. It centers around the adventures of Captain Christopher Pike, who commanded the Enterprise before Captain Kirk commanded her in the legendary 5-year mission. Captain Pike, of course, was featured in the 2-part episode, The Menagerie. It was originally played by Jeffrey Hunter on the original series, and is played by Anson Mount now on Strange New Worlds. But I think you've got that. I think obviously, Gail Gadot's Wonder Woman has been quite a good character. I've liked her a lot. I heard that they are going to try to say that James Gunn, who's now going to be the executive producer in charge of the DC movie universe, has decided to keep her as Wonder Woman for now.
Good choice. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good choice. I'm a little sorry that Henry Cavill kind of dumped. I really liked him, but I could, the reason I liked him was, you remember the bucket challenge from a few years ago for
I do. Yeah. That's about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, something like that.
almost 6 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He did it while filming his second Superman movie, Superman v Batman. And he did it in his Superman costume, and they dumped like 6 buckets of ice water on him, and he's just laughing. And I thought, yeah, that's what Superman would do. Superman would just let him dump cold water on him and laugh about it.
Yeah, he'd be a very good sport about it. And now that you touched on the Star Trek, and I know that we're going to bring this up with your YouTube podcast covering the world of Star Trek, the Star Trek review show. How has that been going? Because it's been now a little less than a year.
It's been a couple years.
A couple years now. Okay.
We've had a couple seasons. We've done a couple years of Discovery. We've done a couple seasons of Strange New Worlds, Lower Decks, and we did Prodigy. And we that's done pretty well. I mean, we have people chime in, ask questions. I think they watch a lot more later on in the they don't always watch it live, but they catch up with us throughout the week, and we get a few interesting questions about what we think about certain things on Star Trek. I think that goes pretty well. I've got a great co-host in my friend Chris Pavone, who is a lifelong Star Trek fan like I am. And we try to cover a lot of very deep subjects within about a 1-hour time frame of what we liked, what we didn't like, and some of what we think are the deeper meanings of some episodes and things we hope to see or predict that we'll see. And I'm really pleased with it. It's a lot of fun to work with Chris, to do that with him. and just it's just two buddies who do just want to talk about their favorite Star Trek shows. And I know there's a lot of other podcasts that deal with Star Trek, including another one that I'm really fond of, and one called Star Trek: The Pod Directive, which is hosted by Tawny Newsome, who is the voice actress who does Beckett Mariner from Star Trek Lower Decks, which is one of the animated shows, which is made by the guy who created Rick and Morty.
I love that show. I can't stop
too.
watching it. I watch it over and over each season.
Yeah. Rick and Morty forever. Rick and Morty the DVD. Rick and Morty the movie.
Yeah,
Rick
it's like,
and Morty
like Spaceballs. Spaceballs. Yeah. So let me not technically a Star Trek question, but it's two of them. Okay. I'll start with my first one. Am I alone with Scott Bakula? Because I think he was awesome.
No. I think Captain Jonathan Archer was actually recently mentioned on an episode of Strange New Worlds, and Captain Pike expressed his admiration for him, and how he really wished he could meet him. In fact, in Captain Pike's ready room, he actually has a large picture of the NX-01 on the wall, next to one of Zephyr Cochrane's ship, the Phoenix. So there is a lot of love for Enterprise in modern Trek. If you have not watched it, people mention it all the time. There's a huge. I think it took 20 years, but people finally really got into it. I think there's still some debate about the theme song. It grew on me, but I wouldn't have minded if the show opened every week with Scott Bakula reading the voiceover. If you go on YouTube sometime, they did have a Star Trek Enterprise opening credit where Bakula does read Star Trek's opening, famous opening line, "Space, the Final Frontier." And I was so glad on Strange New Worlds, the first time I saw the credits, that Anson Mont did that. Where it says "Space, the Final Frontier," because if it's going to be a Star Trek show about the Enterprise, you have to do that. The voyages of the Starship Enterprise. You have to have that opening. And Discovery, Voyager, and Deep Space Nine and Lower Decks kind of got around it, but they weren't on the Enterprise, so that's okay. They get a pass. But if you're going to be on a Star Trek show and you're going to be on the Enterprise, you got to do that one. I feel. I think that's very important. And I was sorry they didn't do that really on Enterprise, because I would have loved to hear, because Scott Bakula does a great job reciting it if you find it. But I understand why they went the direction they did, and that was fine. Like I said, it did grow on me, but I did like Enterprise. Don't get me wrong. I mean, a lot of friends of mine really got into Star Trek because of Enterprise.
I can't say I ever heard too many people say that.
Oh no, I think that I think there was a period there, and some people think that Star Trek got oversaturated in the 90s, and I don't think that was the problem. I think because with each Star Trek show, you had to work harder to get the audience back in, because I think there was a lot of people in the audience who felt like if they started liking Deep Space Nine or Voyager, they were somehow being disloyal to the Next Generation. And when the Next Generation first started, there were people I think were afraid that they were going to be disloyal to TOS. We call it now TOS, but now we know, no, it's all Star Trek, man. You're not being disloyal. You're following the stories. You're sticking with it to wherever it goes. And I think now, there's a lot of love for Captain Archer and his crew, enough that I think that there are a lot of fans who would love some sort of storyline where, the NX-01 and NCC 1701 teamed up somehow. We just recently had the Lower Decks Strange New Worlds crossover a couple weeks ago, which was phenomenal. If you're a fan of both shows, which I am and many of my friends are, it was wonderful to see the two crews together having some fun. And you said you like Rick and Morty. I think you'd really love Star Trek: Strange New Worlds. It's not. It's the same kind of humor, but it's not as over the top. It's
Not
still
as not as vulgar in
it's
a
not
way.
as vulgar. It's more family friendly. But it's just, if you love Star Trek and you know the history of Star Trek, the jokes they tell are really funny. They're not mean. They don't make fun of Star Trek. It's like the inside jokes that Trekkies tell each other all the time at conventions. Is all
Right.
it is, and it's
And
wonderful.
and you mentioned something earlier. It was part two of a question
Mm.
about maybe Star Trek being oversaturated around the 90s. I don't think that to be the case
Yeah.
as compared to what I would say unwatchable Star Wars. Because I think that you almost need a roadmap or some sort of Rosetta Stone or something to make sense of what the hell's going on. Hopefully, well, I don't think Star Trek would go down that route. It should be a lot easier to follow.
Yeah. I think that. Okay, I'm just gonna go ahead and say this, and I hope I'm not gonna get your show in any trouble.
I already started it, so it's okay.
I've got to say this, and I'm going to say this flat out. I don't blame Kathleen Kennedy, and I don't blame Disney Studios for anything that went wrong. And I definitely do not blame any of the actors. They just came in and did their jobs, and I think they did the best possible job all of them could do. I think the biggest problem was that when they hired J.J. Abrams, Abrams did not want to do 3 movies. He was just going to do the one and done. And they had to beg him to come back for the 3rd movie. I think Rian Johnson's movie would have worked better as the 3rd movie because you have the big thing where Kylo Ren, and spoiler alert, if you didn't see this movie, it's been out for 6 years, folks. If you
It's like
haven't seen it,
Titanic. The boat sinks.
Yeah. Kylo Ren kills Snoke, which is the dumbest name for a big ominous villain I could come up with. It sounds like a second-rate Sesame Street character. Okay, Snoke.
Yeah.
Snoke. That's what I think of when no, and so he takes out Snoke, and it's like when I saw that, everybody applauded, but I'm sitting there thinking, dude, you just had this big moment where you killed the big bad halfway through the 2nd movie. What are you doing for the rest of this movie? And then what are you going to do for the 3rd movie? I don't get this. What's going on here? And
I would suggest time travel if you want to fix that, but all right.
No. I'm against time travel. I'm against if you could time travel in the last 50 years, maybe. But anything beyond that, I don't want to go anywhere where I can't find a working toilet. That's my biggest
That's
fear.
way far back.
These people who want to go back in time to like Outlander or something, it's like, no. I'm not going back to a time period when they had things like the bubonic plague and people didn't take showers and there are no bathrooms. I'm sorry. No, I'm 53 years old. I have to be near a working toilet. I'm sorry. I hope I didn't go too far there, but
no, but that makes sense. So with that, how can the listeners of Let's Find Out, where can they find out more about your Star Trek show? I know it's on YouTube. Okay. Is there any other platform?
Yeah, just go to the YouTube Movers and Shakers channel or look for moversandshakers.org. When I say end, it's the end symbol. Just look for that. There are other shows on the moversandshakers.org that I know that my friend Brandon Troy did a whole review show of Marvel's Secret Invasion, and numerous other ones. But I just one last quick defense about the you can look at it as either defense or throwing somebody under the bus. It could go either way. But I will say this: I think J.J. Abrams is highly overrated. I will say that I have been much more happy with the Jon Favreau and Peter, direction they've gone on with things like The Mandalorian, and I'm excited about Ahsoka because I love that character from the Clone Wars animated series. I don't know. Did you ever watch that?
I have not. I've been off that train for a long time.
Okay, I've got to say this: watch the Clone Wars and Rebels because they actually redeem the prequels. It's like this is my thing about the prequels. Okay, if George Lucas could have done a big Game of Thrones multi-year, multi-season series like Game of Thrones, the prequels would have been so much better because there's so many things he just couldn't get into because he didn't have the room or the time to do it. Whereas I think Abrams wanted to rehash the original trilogy with new characters. And I think that, I mean, I came to really like a lot of the characters. I came to really love Rey, Rose, Finn, and Poe, and even to a certain extent Kylo Ren. But I wish they'd gone in a slightly different direction and that sort of thing. But I understand people's frustration. I mean, that's one reason I feel like we picked up a lot more Star Trek fans over the last few years because they got so annoyed with Star Wars and they came over to see Star Trek and fell in love with it. So I'm happy about that because Star Trek is now having the big moment with the various shows that are out there. I just hope that Paramount will realize what they've got and start respecting the writers and actors more because they're the ones who make this stuff happen. It's not the guy in the front office. Okay.
No, not the pencil pusher. No.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Disney will function just fine without Bob Eisler. Okay. I really
Agreed.
believe that it would. Yeah. In fact, I'm going to be honest with you. After what I heard, I'm going to make a little news here if you haven't heard. Disney is going to discontinue releasing their movies and TV shows on DVDs and Blu-rays. So, folks, if you really want something, if you want a particular Marvel movie or something, you better go out to Best Buy or Amazon and get it now because I think Disney's going to start pulling that stuff, and I think that's unfortunate. And I think streaming has, kind of overdone it, and I think we're all going to go back to solid hard media. And by that I mean, Blu-rays are going to make a big comeback like vinyl.
Well, look what they did. And this is funny. Look what they did to us when we were growing up. Okay, so we had the 8-track. They say then go to the records. Then from the vinyl, go to the cassette. From the cassette, throw them all away. Throw the records. Go to CDs. From the CDs, go to downloads. Then they're saying, well, now you go buy the CDs again and buy the limited edition records. So you never know how this is going to go.
Yeah, well, I think it depends on your preference when it comes to that. What you like to hear with the sound. I mean, or what you want for the convenience. I mean, when I'm at the gym and I'm lifting weights, I kind of want I want to listen to my streaming music.
I do the same thing. Yeah.
My random thing. I mean, because I can't carry a record player on my back and work out. That ain't gonna happen.
And I threw my Walkman away about 40 years ago. So
yeah, but I mean, like you could be driving somewhere and you're somewhere you run out of streaming minutes or you got no Wi-Fi signal. So yeah, good old CDs are still reliable. And I think honestly with the vinyl, it's like some people like that kind of that scratchy sound of the needle touching the LP and then that little crinkly sound and then the music coming up.
Yeah, I'm a fan of that myself.
Or even they just buy the LP because the cover art is so beautiful. You want to put it in a frame and hang it on your wall.
And I had that right in front of me in my studio. And with your new release, where can the listeners get their own copy? Because I know you do the conventions, but if they can't catch you in person, where can they purchase a copy of the book?
I'm on Amazon. Just go to Amazon and you can just look for The Adventures of Madison Brown, and you should go right there. You can also download the Kindle version. You can, read a sample for free. And let me know what you think. I always, hope for some good feedback. Moving into something else I'm working on. I can't really talk about this part right now, but I recently submitted a proposal for another Bigfoot story to somebody else, and they accepted it. I can't really talk much about it until it's finished, but hopefully by the end of the year I'll be able to talk about that one. It's just a short story, but I'm very excited about it. It's something I've been wanting to do for a while, and Once again, my friend Mary came through for me on this. She was the one who told me about this. It was another friend of hers, and so she hooked me up with it because she knew how much I love Bigfoot stuff. So she's like, "Oh, hey, I better tell Josh about this Bigfoot anthology." So, but I mean, check back with me first of 2024, and hopefully this story will have been accepted, and I'll be able to talk a little bit more about it then. But
Awesome. And if you can, come on the show. We'll talk about it here.
oh yeah, that's the saying. Yeah, I would love to come on back and talk about it then, and hopefully I have some other stuff going on. I will tell you though, I am thinking, I am planning to move beyond publishing through Amazon right now, because um, there are several small publishing firms that delve in horror and science fiction that are advertised on social media, and I want to reach out to one of those because I think I would get a larger distribution. um, I'd really, I mean, I tell you, it's going to be a happy day for me to see one of my books in a Barnes and Noble somewhere.
That'd be awesome, man. Yeah.
I would love to see that one day. That's been my goal from the beginning, is to have a book in there. But and I did recently put a copy of the new book. I donated a copy to my local library here in Charlottesville, and I know a friend of mine, some other friends of mine, were trying to get copies in their local libraries to try to help me out. So,
Excellent, man.
you know,
Good luck to you with this new book. And before we go, outside of Star Trek, Star Wars, and the things that we know, quick fire, can you give us a handful of your picks for some of the better sci-fi available today?
yeah, okay. So, big one, Black Mirror, very Twilight Zone esque kind of BBC show. If you've not watched it, it's and I think it's fifth or sixth season on Netflix. Essentially, it's a variety sci-fi show that delves into kind of horror esque and science fiction esque kind of stories centered around the internet, or modern technology, artificial intelligence, that sort of thing. It's a great show. Severance, hell of a good series on Apple TV. Another good one on Apple TV that I really love. Their adaptation of Isaac Asimov's Foundation series. It's starting its second season, or it may have already started that. And let's see. Oh, Mrs. Davis is a very interesting quasi science fiction esque kind of show that's on Peacock right now. It's the story about a nun who is trying to find an artificial intelligence and destroy it. And that I've watched the first three episodes of that. I really like it. It's very quirky, very funny. Like I said, it's quasi science fiction, but I find it very engaging. Basically, this thing called Mrs. Davis is like a artificial intelligence and social media that essentially is kind of interlinking everybody around the world, and people are getting more and more into it. But it's kind of a comedy esque, and I think the boys are coming back. Anybody
Oh, yes, I'm a
on
fan.
Amazon? Yes. And then I'm very excited about Ahsoka coming out later in this month. Ahsoka, who is of course the former Padawan of one Anakin Skywalker, returns, and for the first time, fans of the show Star Wars Rebels will get to see the live action versions of several of those characters are going to show up. So that's going to be awesome. And then in November, we're going to see Marvel's The Marvels, featuring Carol Danvers and every other superhero calls himself Marvel, teaming up for a big movie. So that's something to look forward to. Yeah, there's a lot of other science fiction out there, and obviously we're getting a new season of Doctor Who in a few weeks, in a couple months. David Tennant will be returning as the Doctor for a few episodes before leading into the next Doctor. Apparently, the 10th doctor, the ninth doctor, I'm sorry, they're all out of order now, but had some the 10th doctor, I think it was, had some unfinished business, so he has returned to finish something. And Catherine Tate is also returning to the show, so that's very exciting. If anybody who was a big fan of David Tennant's run as Doctor Who is going to be really excited, I think.
Well, based on your recommendations, I think I'm going to start watching again. I'm going to get some
Yeah.
good TV time in. I appreciate it. Hey, I appreciate you coming back on the show. And when the new book comes out, definitely come back next year. We'll talk about that. And we'll stay in touch during the year. You know, you and I, we text at least once or twice a month and check up on each other. And I really appreciate you doing that, by the way.
Oh, not a problem. Happy to do it. Yeah, but I'm, just everybody keep, being. It's really hard right now because we've got so much going on in the world. It's best to just, keep a positive thought, folks. It's hard, it's frustrating, but sometimes, get away from social media. Well, except for your show, obviously.
Yes, thank you.
Read a good book. Check in with friends, family. Eat something good, and just don't completely tune out like they said in the 60s, but step back a little bit and just try to remember the world is not all doom and gloom. There is still stuff to look forward to in it. So
we have more in common than difference. Once we figure that out, everything's easy.
I think so, yeah.
Adventures of Madison Brown by author Josh Pritchett. Thank you for being on Let's Find Out with co-host Diego. We'll have you back on next year. And with that, this has been another excellent episode of Let's Find Out with co-host Diego. Please check us out on all our social media pages, on our YouTube channel, and also we are on Rumble, doing very well. Thank you very much to the listeners. Thank you for taking this journey with me. Until next time, my friends.
Thank you for listening to Let's Find Out with co-host Diego. We're on Spotify, Google Podcasts, TuneIn, Pocket Casts, and on Anchor. For more information about Let's Find Out with co-host Diego, please visit us on Facebook.com/co-host Diego, on Twitter at co-host_Diego, and on Instagram as co-host Diego. Copyright co-host Diego. All content for Let's Find Out is the property of co-host Diego and is served directly from our servers with no modification, redirects, or rehosting. All celebrity impersonators are paid performers. The impersonated celebrities do not endorse or promote any views or opinions expressed by our guests, co-host Diego, or Let's Find Out. The information shared on Let's Find Out is provided on an as-is basis with no guarantees of completeness, accuracy, usefulness, or timeliness.